This is the fourth episode of a series on the Secondary Schools Football League. And on this episode, we have the perspective of past players in the SSFL. And the purpose of the discussion is to elicit opinions from the players themselves. Oftentimes, people who played in the league get a little bit lost in the conversation unless they're involved immediately as coaches. So the idea now is to get a good sense of the game and to jump in with players across a few generations. So I have Richard Goddard, Travis Mulraine, Yohance Marshall, Cornell Glen, and hopefully another participant as we go through. So, guys, it's 2021. The only football happening is a bit of national team football. The news of the day is the happenings in Europe, but on the ground there is no football at the lower level. We already have enough difficulties as it is in terms of playing days, training days, etc. The first thing I want to jump into is, where do you see secondary schools football, if it occurs in 2021, in the mix in terms of improving the accounting for the year then, right? Because we've had very little football across the board. How important is the secondary schools football season to football in Trinidad and Tobago? Richard?
Yes, good night to everyone, and thanks for having me on. The product of secondary schools football has undoubtedly taken a hit. The simple fact that it has been something that is, I dare say, a constant in the players being able just to play, to get some more matches underneath their belt. That's not there. I think, based on everything, secondary schools football is at a little bit of a crossroads, and it's not what people think. I think the crossroads is more about how can they reshape the product itself. I know that, from some discussions that have been had previously, that the whole concept of trying to ensure that development takes place has been kind of front and center. It's been more front and center now than I believe for quite some time. But there are challenges to that, a lot of challenges, and the bigger schools will probably look and say, well, yeah, they could probably do it. Some of the smaller schools will undoubtedly have challenges because of multiple other things. But I think that's, at this point in time, that's the real crossroads. How do they maybe reestablish the secondary schools environment as a true developmental environment for young players, and to make sure it factors in with the short-term and long-term development plan of the TTFA and the regional associations as well. Now, I can't speak for the for South or North or whichever, but I know in Tobago at that point in time, we were trying to restructure a lot of things, and that would have actually included secondary schools football, having a lot more of a developmental pathway, including having off-season matches against the what would have been the Tobago Football Association youth representative teams. But that isn't the case right now, and based on that, I know from my experience in secondary schools football, especially when Bishop's High School went in the Premier Division, if that had held, we probably would have remained in the Premier Division, just because the environment would have begun to change. So I think secondary schools itself is really trying to see how best it could reshape its developmental scheme. I know they are looking at possibly having futsal, including and beach soccer, even if it's not competition, just encouraging something different than normal football, just to, if for nothing else, to change the perspective of the youth players coming up, that football and football alone, there are different types of different versions of the game you can play, and there are quite a few former national players who have actually utilized these different versions of the game to improve their technical and tactical understanding of the game. So that's kind of where I see secondary schools having their biggest challenge on the field itself.
You're saying if there's no 11v11 for 2021, the alternative is an alternative form of the game to keep people active and engaged?
Well, it would be one part of trying to ensure that development still takes place. Now, I could speak for futsal a bit, because based on everything so far, I've been asked to be the representative for futsal in Tobago. And in Bishop's High School, we utilized futsal a lot. And I am not claiming that I'm a futsal coach, but I did understand the simple, the basics of futsal really helped to develop the player. And it was simply a case of, okay, let's try using it and let's see, let's understand exactly how it's used by those players who who have used it before, the Ronaldinhos, the Bebetos, and
Right.
numerous Latin American and now some European players as well.
So
And
let me ask Yohance this, because Yohance just spent, I guess, several weeks, I don't know how long, with the futsal team. What was the experience like of switching from 11v11 to futsal, and how relevant do you see it in terms of an SSFL context?
Good night, everybody. Thanks for having me, Chambi. I agree with Richard. I think if you look at a lot of the Central and South American countries, they use this as their tool for development, right? Brazil, a lot of these countries, you don't start outside on the field first. You start with the futsal, and then you can transition if you want to continue with futsal after 12 years, continue with futsal or go football or whatever direction you choose to go. But definitely, I think it raises your awareness of the game, tactical and technical. Futsal is very technical, and it's different from football. You see it much differently. It's plays you're running, so it's like basketball is a hybrid of basketball and football. So it's something that I think we should implement into our curriculum in the schools. It wouldn't hurt at all, and we will create better technical players. You have a flat surface that you will be playing on, so you can read the ball, you can develop in that way first, and then after, when you transition onto the football field, you can judge the ball differently. So I definitely agree with Richard here, that we should implement some sort of futsal or also into the schools.
So the average Trini on the street looks at that and says, that's just glorified small goal, right? I mean, obviously we know it's not, but that's the perspective. So how is it different?
You want me to go, Richard? I see you. Yeah.
All right, well, Well, I could go. It is very different. Of course it's not played on the same surface. The area that you're playing on is a lot smaller. The way you actually control the ball a lot of times is not the usual inside of the foot control or outside. You actually have to use the sole of your foot, which allows you an opportunity to kind of play in a 360 variance. If you receive the ball the inside of your foot when you're playing football, you tend to direct yourself in a certain pathway. With futsal, once the ball's underneath your foot, you can go left, right, front, back, you can turn, you can do whatever you really and truly want. So it definitely changes the way you play. It also allows you to see the game from from FIFA's version, the best version of a small-sided game. And FIFA, in terms of football development, that's 4v4. And that's exactly what futsal is, plus your goalkeepers, of course. But it is literally 4v4 play, which falls pretty much right in line with FIFA's understanding of what it takes to actually help develop the player, to develop their technical and tactical understanding of the game. It's also, because it's very fast-paced, you are forced to think a lot faster. You're forced to kind of think maybe about two moves or three moves ahead of anything that's happening around you at that time. In normal football, you have an entire field to play with, and the build-up play can be, well, more times than not, it is, it's very step by step by step by step. But in futsal, because everything is very quick and there are a lot of quick touch passing, there's no real defender, midfielder, or striker per se. Everybody kind of plays.
Right, there's a lot of interchanging of roles as well.
Yeah, so it really does make things very, very different, but it allows you to actually think through your game, I think, eventually a lot faster, and it kind of simplifies the game after a while, because you are thinking ahead, like you're literally thinking 2, 3, 4 plays ahead. So at this point in time, this is going to happen, and then that's supposed to happen, and then you're supposed to be able to make your run here. And it actually allows for, when you're playing on the field, to see the game almost in those 4v4 situations, which is again something that FIFA actually encourages coaches to have their players do.
So let me build on that. Travis, I know you said that you've, in your critique over time about SSFL players after your generation, you talk about the intelligence or the deficit in terms of tactical awareness and intelligence on the ball and off the ball. Obviously, what I'm trying to do now is tie a linkage between what we've just established with futsal and the rapidity of the game, the pace of the game, and speed of thought. But now coming to that 11v11 context, assuming we go back to football in its 11v11 format, what can be done to improve speed of thought in the SSFL context? We've seen some games that are played at a more deliberate pace, that don't necessarily have the same level of demands. In this conversation, I'm going to be assuming that we are looking to extract the cream of the crop, right? Players that are going to be following in your footsteps, or maybe elite players going into the collegiate environment, but really leaning towards the professional side, because obviously we need a broader base of players to be filtering into the national team. So where did you guys, Cornell, Travis, get your speed of thought honed?
Well, good evening. Thanks for having me. My speed of thought was honed in the same environment, the same unstructured, small goal environment that you alluded to, right? The problem that we had back in the days that futsal wasn't very popular, if it was even in existence. what they have done is given you a hockey-sized goalpost so you can maintain your shooting. As one of the criticisms back in the day from our coaches is that when we play small goal during the off season, coming back to the 11v11 setting, we were very goal shy. We wouldn't want to shoot the ball as we would usually do during the season, right? Because of the small goal environment where you have a very small goal where you want to be so precise with your shooting that you want to get closer to the goal, right? Because playing small goal, you will hardly find players taking much long range shots, right? So I totally agree with the other guys who just spoke, Goddard and Yohance, say that this could be used as a tool to help improve the speed of thought of the players. My biggest criticism is that not enough resources are being put into the collegiate system where we have proper coaching. You look at Arima College, I've worked there with Angasi for 3 years, in fact. We won the national title for 2 out of those 3 years. And as you see, Angus has continued with basically a dynasty because he's a professional coach. So he brings that professional level to the players. Too many times you have coaches who really, and I'm not knocking coaches here, but they don't understand methodology of teaching players. They don't pay much attention to the tactical intelligence of their players, right? A lot of times you have a situation where you have 1 or 2 good players and you basically try to build the team around them, right? There's no, you spoke about off the field, there's no education in terms of dieting, in terms of proper rest, strength training. All these things are lacking, right? If you take a tour of, let's say, the top 10 teams in Trinidad and Tobago in the SSFL, if you find 2 teams that do weight training, you find plenty. So the holistic development of the players now, you ask about the place of the SSFL in our football pyramid. The SSFL is critical because fortunately or unfortunately, players can play in the SSFL until 20 years old. Now think about that. You have a 20-year-old or 18-year-old leaving school, right? I played with the national team at 18 years old. So you basically have a man leaving school who is not tactically intelligent. He's technically deficient for the most part. He doesn't have any proper idea about eating properly, about resting, especially these days with social media. I know a lot of these. I have an academy, and on my chat, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, these guys are still chatting, sending messages, XYZ, you know? They don't understand the importance of having a good night's rest. They think they can sleep it out during the day, right? So these little things make a big difference, right?
Gotcha.
Go ahead.
No. I was just agreeing with you. But let me jump to Cornell to piggyback on that. What's your thoughts on the speed of thought issue?
We thought about the futsal being implemented. I think as much as I agree with it, I don't think it's something that's needed right now. I think Travis touched on a lot of the stuff that is missing in the game today. You know, there's a reason why Angasiv and Naps, you know, have been dominating the league for like two years straight. You know, they are the only organization or school that is taking the development of the game seriously and actually, you know, investing financially and investing the time into the players. The school league football is the last step before a player goes into professional football in Trinidad, unfortunately, because of poor system that we have here. each and every footballing nation around the world has programs where clubs and even the national team have players from the age of 8 straight up to senior level. We don't. So when you have a league like the SSFL, where some of the coaches, and again, as Travis said, not trying to knock anybody, are absolutely poor. I coach NAPS under 16, and when I will have time off from the league, and the players come back, they come back with all the bad habits that they will go and learn from their coaches. And then you have to retrain and they have to relearn everything again. So because you have this poor system, and I think a lot of it is to be blamed on we continue to elect these dinosaurs to run the school football league, and they are not paying enough attention. It's like you have an institution, a college, a school. It's one of the biggest institutions in the country, but the teachers there are poor. Obviously, the students coming out gonna be uneducated. So I think we need to try and pay more attention into the coaching aspect of it, educating coaches, sending coaches on courses, and I'm going back to the electing the officials that are dinosaurs who have been in football for as long as I know myself, playing the game from primary school or junior sec. These are the same people who has been in charge of football, and we keep re-electing them over and over and expecting change, with no creativity, no new initiative to improve the college football. I remember playing my first college game, school football, Hainsey Crawford Stadium, in an almost packed Hainsey Crawford Stadium against presentation. It's difficult to even see it. You can't even imagine seeing 5,000 people in the stadium now. Is that because of the poor quality of the football? Maybe. Is that because you're not, promoting the football as well? Most definitely. So there's a lot to be changed. We can say is because the lack of the coaching or the lack of management in the hierarchy of the SSFL, but we can be here all night, trying to discuss and trying to find solutions. But I think a lot have to be done with the coaching, because as I said, it's the last step of young players going into the professional league, and we need to get them, as Travis said, we have players 17, 18, 20 years old playing college football, when you have in England a 15-year-old and a 14-year-old making their debut in the Premier League. So we need to get these things sorted out. We need to pay more attention to our developmental program and getting the best out of the player at a much younger age.
So let me ask this. I have three things in mind. One, I want to get from each of you your first experience seeing yourself on video playing football. First time anybody recorded you playing with a critical view to analyzing your play.
That wouldn't be secondary. Well, it might have been in my year in Signal Hill. I think it was in '94. We would have played Princestown in San Fernando in Skinner's Park, and we tied that match 1-1. Was an intercol final, and then we came back. There was a replay a few days later, and I think that was the first time I actually saw myself. I was 16, 17, somewhere around there.
Was it TV highlights, or was it somebody literally bringing footage and saying, okay, here's what you did well and then what you didn't do good? Well,
no, that was TV highlights. To go to that aspect of it, I would have been in college maybe. Yeah, it would have probably been in college that first time where it was actually a video session of the match itself and my performance and whatnot.
okay.
But yeah, the first time I actually really saw myself on TV was 16, 17, and it was highlights. I think we did get the video and we did watch the video, and I think we did do some video analysis.
All right, so let me skip across to everybody because I have a point in mind. Travis, when was the first time you had a critical view of yourself playing?
That will be at around 23, 24 at W Connection. Stuart Charles Furvier, he would do video analysis of every single game because we had we had to do stats ourselves. Good passes, bad passes, tackles, shots, right? So we really learned how to measure your performance according to your role and function, because you cannot be a good defender. Let's take, for instance, defenders today. Everybody is obsessed with defenders who can pass the ball out the back and stuff like that. But during the game, you do the analysis, and 5 times you were in 1v1 situations and you were beaten 4 out of the 5 times. But in possession, you made what? 24 to 25 passes. Did you have a good game or not? You know, so it's a great point you brought up. This is a critical thing for young players.
Yohance, you?
I think my first experience with video analysis was in St. Anthony's. It wasn't as in depth as when I went to school away, but we did used to look over games of ourselves and the opponents that we were about to play. So St. Anthony's College probably 2002, 2003, and then more in depth when I went to school in the States.
Cornell? The audio. Let me see if we get him back. Can we couldn't hear you.
Yeah, hear you now?
Yeah.
Good now.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. My first time was with foot golf with deceased Arthur Jack Brown. I think probably one of the best coaches that I ever played with. A tactician, you know, a genius, you know, and we used to do a lot of short film and, you know, show me. He's the one who taught me how to run off the ball and get into spaces and get it behind defenders. You know, I learned a lot on them.
So, and here's how I'm going to tie this together. Travis, you said that, and I completely understand your point. You said that players get a kind of an inflated sense of having arrived by seeing themselves with TV coverage at a young age in the SSFL. So the camera crews arrive and they do the highlights. But in the coaching side of it, there's really not a player benefit, right? They're not getting a critique of play, not just individually, but in the context of small group, off the ball movement, the full team moving up the field, the whole narrative moving laterally, moving vertically. None of that is being reflected in a conversation. Now, if you translate that to the pairs in other countries, let's say a 16-year-old playing in the SSFL compared to a 16-year-old playing, and I'm not going to use an academy or club team, let's say in France or Spain, but let's even just use an above average team, but it's not with a club. They're already doing that.
You can go to the US high school system, which is, I think, is equivalent to our SSFL.
Fair enough. Right. And that is involved, right? Yeah. So yeah. In 2021, I don't know if we were to go to SSFL matches in recent time, how many teams have a videographer with the team taking the independent footage? How many teams are having a videographer at training, taking because practice itself is an environment for that, and definitely exactly. The preparation matches. But the amazement of seeing yourself play it is a big trigger. And so I'm submitting that is one of the initial points at which we are failing or missing an opportunity. I suspect that there are probably a couple coaches who are doing it, but as a best practice across the board. I mean, these days everybody has a device that can record to some degree,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So I wanted to tie that together, and because the point is that we shouldn't be waiting until 2023. You know what I mean? Like to even 18, 19 to get that. So the next question I have is from each of you, when was your first experience playing outside of Trinidad and Tobago?
All right, so I guess I will start. My first experience playing outside of Trinidad would be with St. Anthony's. We used to take tours every summer or every other summer, and we'll go to the States, play a couple if it's school teams or high school teams. I think I was around 14 or so, 14 or 15. So around 2000. And
Okay.
we went to the States, play a couple games, and just get that experience. I think those kind of experiences change your mentality in terms of, okay, how fit you need to get. We were always skillful, but it will only get you to a certain point, So yeah, my first experience was probably around 14.
What did you see that triggered anything in your mind about football?
It's I think you are constantly learning, and it is an opportunity for you to experience a different
Cultural environment.
view. Yeah, at 14, Trinidadian, you don't always get that experience. I was fortunate enough, but to travel with a team or on a tour at 14, I think was something special. And I'm going with older guys, the Abiola, Clarence, and these other experienced guys. You're going on a tour with these guys. For me, it was an eye opener.
Richard?
I have to dig in my memory banks a bit. I believe it would have been 1991. The national under 14 at the time, we went on a trip to Venezuela, and we played, I believe, I remember them saying that we played against Venezuela on the 19 team. I think we lost 9-0. So we were on a 14 team playing. Honestly, I'm not sure if it was on the 19 team. I think it was probably more like an under 16 team. But it was a really interesting trip. We played in Caracas. We traveled up in the mountains. We were pretty much in the clouds. We ended up playing on a dirt pitch somewhere. I can't even remember where it was. But that was really and truly my first experience, to my memory, of me actually going and playing outside of Trinidad and Tobago.
Yeah. Travis?
National under 20 it would be, because I wasn't successful with the younger age group. So that would be versus Aruba in Aruba. Keith Locloy was the coach. Again, that was a eye-opening experience. I know exactly what you're getting to, that experience of traveling,
Right.
having to be in an airport, moving on time, because that's one of our biggest problems in Trinidad, punctuality. You can't miss the plane, you can't be late for the plane. When they're calling calling you to board, you have to be on spot, and but the experience of traveling is critical. And little academies in the US are afforded the opportunity to go to Brazil, Europe, Asia. So even if they don't make it as top players, and those that do, they are already miles ahead of us mentally, right? They talk about football age and biological age.
Correct.
Where some players are like Pulisic. I think Pulisic has more cap than Shaka Hislop for Trinidad and Tobago. Shaka could be his grandfather, right? So that experience of traveling and experiencing different cultures, and as Yohance alluded to, the intensity of the game, right, is critical to the development of players.
Yeah, you're talking about playing age versus your physical age.
Yes.
Two different things.
Experience. Yeah.
Absolutely. Cornell, yours?
Mine was national under 16. We went on a Central American tour to El Salvador, Guatemala, and Costa Rica. The cultural differences was, a huge shock to me at the point in time. Food was a problem as well, because as young players traveling and having to eat, the different stuff was always, a difficult process. I think I got sick throughout that trip. I tried black beans for the first time and I hated it. No, I
KFC, Cornell.
Yeah. No, I cook black beans on a regular. The cultural differences, as I said, was a huge shock to me. And like the love for the game, the passion for the game, and the structure development, because we got a chance to where we train, I think was a club ground. So you got to see part of the facilities and stuff like that. So it was a great experience, and an eye opener for me.
So, you guys understand where I'm going with all of this. And one of my fundamental contentions, if we're talking about, obviously we're talking SSFL, but really we're talking about youth football, because the SSFL is such an institution within the context of youth football. But we know that our environment is CONCACAF, but we don't prepare coming through the youth stages sufficiently for the exposure to CONCACAF, right? The dynamics of the countries in the region, aside from St. Lucia, St. Vincent, etc., which of course is not the same as Trinidad and Tobago, but the broader idea of seeing the passion in Central America, understanding the hostility in Guatemala, or being able to frame the mentality in Mexico, understanding the relationship between where their players come from, and their like absolute commitment. I believe I read or heard Kenwin Jones mention something some time back, which I completely endorse. The idea of, if we think that we have poverty in Trinidad and Tobago, and yes, we have it, but if we understand really some of the environments that our competitors are coming from, and if we could see that in an earlier stage, a 15-year-old traveling to our neighbors, our competitors in Central America and Mexico from an earlier age, getting the experience, will or should return to Trinidad and Tobago with a hunger. I mean, that's obviously only one part of the mix, but also seeing the playing styles, seeing the differences, understanding where football is in the whole scheme of things. And so in that context, is the SSFL may not be the absolute forum to provide all the answers. So the question is, where's the dot supposed to be connected?
Let me jump in here, bro. I I am an advocate that the SSFL is the forum for developing our football. Here's my reason. Cornell alluded to Naparima College, right? The only thing they don't do at Naparima College is give the players a salary. Everything else is in place. Probably, and I don't want to sound anyhow, probably is the difference with people of the East Indian stock and the African stock. Because there's no reason why the CICs and the QRCs cannot do better, right? Because let's go back to the 80s and 70s where these schools, Cornell spoke about in the 90s playing in front of a full stadium. Where did the money go? The money went into the school coffers. So why isn't any of these school grounds either top class artificial turf or a proper playing turf? They never reinvested any of that money that they made over all the decades into player development or into infrastructural development, right? You go to certain schools. I coached at Arima for 3 years. I was captain, I was coach, equipment manager, right? I had to beg teachers to give up of the time because working in a school environment, children cannot leave the school compound unless they are accompanied by a teacher from Monday to Friday. On a weekend, it's different, right? So the coach is basically in charge if you have a friendly on a Saturday, but from Monday to Friday, the teachers are in charge. There were very few teachers willing to give up of their free time to accompany the players. So I had to use a student as a kind of manager of sorts, right? So these schools have really dropped the ball in terms of development. But as you said earlier, do they see themselves as the developmental league in the football pyramid? I don't think so, right? I had the experience of working in the Ministry of Education, so I understand the system a bit better than you all, right? And this SSFL is a principals league. So the principals could decide tomorrow here what? No SSFL for the next 4 years until this COVID thing is over. And Mr. Gonzalez and his executive could do nothing about it.
So before I continue on this,
could I just add to that a little bit?
Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
Travis spoke about NAPS, right? I think the difference with NAPS is that they hired Angus and put their trust in him to run their program. Unlike a lot of other schools where they will hire a coach, but pastor this and principal this, still want to have control.
And teacher that.
And teacher that, and who parents spending money and the son must play, and and all that nonsense happening in football. Right? And on top of that, I think one of the biggest problem we have is that we need a governing body to govern school football. And when I say school football, I mean from primary school, first year, all the way up to secondary school, who's in charge of school football and the development of young players in Trinidad and Tobago.
One governing body.
One governing body. And that's simply because we don't have the structure like other footballing countries, as I mentioned earlier, where clubs will have that system where we have 8-year-old all the way up to senior level. So we need somebody to take control of the developmental programs of the kids. When you have schools, top schools, who have the power to recruit all the good players in a like we say south, in a southern zone, that's also a big problem. Because when you talk about like we say the southern zone, all the players who want to go to either NAPS or Presentation College. You understand? When you talk about the North Zone, they want to go to the top school, St. Anthony's or all the other top schools. And the lesser schools have problem with that. So we need a one government body where we I don't know if regulate is the proper word, but you know, we could have a proper structure where the players can be spread among schools, where the programs could be well maintained and well organized. You know, so players wouldn't have to be forced to choose only this school or that school because they want to go and play football. You know, I think, you know, stuff like that to be implemented to try and help the game at a youth level.
And then
Go ahead,
add
yeah.
on to that, it will come back to exactly what you say earlier on with the coaches' education, right?
Coaches' education.
So you hit it on the head earlier on. Yourself and Travis mentioned it. We have to educate our coaches in order to have that proper development. And we talk about I've played in Iceland, and that's exactly what they do or did. You know,
In the US as well, they
educate,
retired MLS players and they send them to do coaching courses.
Exactly, and they educated. They had a nationwide course, I think, and over 700 or more people were licensed by UEFA. So we need to do the same, where everybody is not gonna be tactically in the same thing, but if we are a little more educated now, when our players are transitioning from one age group to another age group, it is not going to be that difficult. They will have a certain balance of technical ability or foundation for understanding of the game, but we don't have that across the board. You know, you would have one coach teaching something here and he could be teaching you the wrong thing, and then when you go into another system where is the proper way of doing things, these players now fall behind. You know, so we need to educate our coaches as well.